Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to dive into baby rolls, really combining crocodile breath with our baby rolls. I want to work on drawing out that breath into our lower abdominals and kind of being able to spotlight focus one side, other side, make sure we can build into that level of balance, but bringing that into our rotational movements of our baby rolls. Real important, since we're going to be working a lot of hips, we're going to get hip mobility, shoulder mobility before we get to the baby rolls. It'll be a little bit on the intense side, so I want to kind of go back and have a refresher on the rules of pain before we get started. Rules of pain are a two-part. The first one is pain is binary. It is either yes, you are in pain, or no, you are not in pain. There is no middle ground. Slight discomfort is a level of pain. So once we acknowledge that pain is present with our movement, the next part is quantifying it on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being not painful, 10 being excruciating. As long as it's below a level 3, 0, 1, 2, it's okay to move into it slowly, cautiously, safely, non-forcefully. If you're going over a level 3, then you are moving too far, too fast. Slow down, back off. Find the area of your movement where you can keep it in that 0, 1, 2, 3. And if you cannot do that, then you need to skip that movement altogether. Stay in place, focus on the crocodile breath, which is what we're going to be starting with. So, with all that, let's get started. We're going to start on our back with our crocodile breath, making our big C-shaped hands. I want to place those C-shaped hands so that the thumb is pressing into your lower back and your index fingers are pressing into your abdominals. Hands are going below the ribs and above the hip bone in that nice, soft, meaty section of your mid-core. And I want to get a nice little squeeze. We'll start with taking some breaths in through the nose. Nice full inhale, filling up that abdominal space, breathing into the belly. Exhale, drawing navel into spine, getting a full expiration of that breath. And as you exhale, allow those hands to squeeze in around the midsection so that you can have a resistance for your inhale to breathe and expand into. So as we breathe in, I want to feel 6 points of contact, 3 on each side. We're breathing into the back space, into your thumb, into the side palm, out through the side body, and into the index fingers, which is coming forward into the abdominal space. And I want to think crocodile or balloon breath. I want to see if we can get all of those points of contact to expand at the same time, for that breath not to go in one direction more so than any other, but can you get a nice even expansion on the inhale, on the exhale, full exhale, drawing your navel into spine. Full inhale in, full exhale out. Notice if it's difficult to breathe into the side palm or into that thumb space, and is it more difficult on the right side or the left side? This is really valuable information that we're going to work on through the class to see if we can get those areas to breathe, to fill in more evenly. Get 1 or 2 more breaths, and then we're going to move, change positions into a tall kneeling position. Now, if you have sensitive knees, you can do this sitting on your bottom, or you could do this sitting in a chair. I'm coming onto knees, and I want to get tall on the knees. We're coming right back into our C-shaped hands, doing more crocodile breath from this position. What you're going to notice is there's a difference in how you're able to fill up that space through the abdominal core based on whether you're laying on your back or in an upright position, which is why crocodile breaths are good to do in a large variety of positions. But the main thing here is I want to cue it in. Can you feel that nice balloon breath, that expansion out? And on the exhale, that nice drawing back in. And once you got that set, I want to drop the hands down, and can you continue to breathe into that crocodile breath? Now we're going to bring arms out to the side with our palms up, and we're going to do some bowls of soup. Now, if you have shoulder pain and it's difficult to bring arms up to the side, it's okay for the arms to be down low or even a little bit in front, especially to start with. We're going to spread hands as wide as you can. I want you to really open up from pinky to thumb. How wide can you spread them out to where you feel some stretch throughout the middle of your hand, in between all the bones of your hand? Extending the elbows fully. We're going to start with palms up, and we're going to do one side at a time, spiraling through the elbow, keeping that hand wide and spread, and we're spiraling all the way up to the shoulder joint. I want to see if you can feel some rotational stretch as you internally squeeze, and then externally rotate as wide as you can, and then same thing on the other side. Going slow so that you can feel how smooth is that spiral rotation through the ball and socket of the humeral joint. Is it smooth on the internal? Is it smooth on the external? Or is there a little bit of a clunky nature to it? Is there an area where it feels a little sensitive? Is it painful? With each one, as you internally rotate, squeeze a little bit further into it. As you externally rotate, squeeze a little bit more into the external rotation. And we can start to move both sides at the same time. And as we're doing so, see if you can start to elevate the hands. Can we bring them more out to straight out through the side and continue to get that nice spiral through the arms? Now, as we're doing this, I want to start to allow the shoulder blade to round up and forward. As I'm rolling in, going as far as I can with internal rotation through that long arm bone, at the last point that I get that squeeze, the shoulder blade is allowed to start to roll over the top of the ribs. And then we're bringing it all back and carrying it through to the other side. So we're going to start to see and feel this kind of like wringing out of the upper shoulders and upper back through those long arms. Again, notice if there's any clunkiness or clickiness in that shoulder space. How does this feel at the elbows? Are both elbows actively extended, or does one elbow want to bend and get soft? Are you feeling a greater stretch through the forearm on one hand compared to the other hand? Then we'll go ahead and shake the arms out, and we're going to come down into our quadruped, hands and knees, spreading fingers nice and wide, grounding palms fully. Taking some, we're going to come right back into our crocodile breath before we do anything else. Breathing into the belly, letting that belly expand in all directions. Exhale, drawing navel into spine. As you're breathing in, notice that your pelvis tilts a little bit forward as you open up. That breath is going to come a little bit more forward into the abdominals and a little less into the low back. As we get a little scoop pelvic tilt forward on the exhale, drawing the navel in, notice how that lightly scoops the pelvis. Allow that action to take place. And we're going to continue with that breath, but on each exhale, we're going to start to load into our wrist. Lightly rocking forward. Inhale, rocking back. On each one, kind of noticing into that wrist space. How does the right wrist feel compared to the left wrist? Are you able to maintain your spread hands? Or do you notice that one hand is kind of rising up and bubbling up? Are you able to maintain that spread to keep all the knuckles down, all the fingers down? Or is there a difference on the right hand compared to the left hand? We're going to continue to rock forward and backwards, but I want to add in some spiraling through the long arms, similar to our bowls of soup. So as you rock back, spiral your elbow pits so that they're facing forward. Exhale, rock forward. Inhale as you rock back, spiral the elbow pits as far back as they go. And then exhale, rock forward. We're kind of feeling into that wrist space with the elbows, with the spiral in different directions. External rotation, elbow pits are going to be forward. Internal rotation, elbow pits are going to be facing more in to your midline or straight back towards your knees. And we're going to turn fingers out to the side and start moving side to side. Again, I want to exhale as I shift over my wrist. Inhale as we come to center, and then exhale through to the other side. Each of these exhales or inhales, we're continuing to fill up our crocodile breath. Feel that breath move into that abdominal core, and we're trying to breathe in that balloon style, getting it to move in all directions. Exhale, navel comes into spine. Continue to notice, how does the right wrist feel related to the left wrist? Is one side stiffer, achier, more restricted? Is it painful? Then we're going to spiral fingers all the way back towards the knees. Closer the hands are, the less intense this is. The further out, the more intense. I don't want this to be super intense. I want this to be nice and juicy. Keeping the palms grounded. Inhale as we're forward. Exhale as we lightly rock back hips to heels. Feeling into that forearm space. I still want to pay attention to right side versus left side, but for this particular movement, the dominant side hand is commonly going to feel a little tighter and a little more dense. So I just want to take note of it, but not make a big deal about it. Then we're going to flip the palms to the back side. This position can be uncomfortable if you're not familiar with it, so I want to stay light on it. We're going to allow the elbows to bend. The first thing I want to feel into is that elbow space. We're going to press into the back of the palms, extending the elbows, and see if there's a little stretch there. If there's a stretch, all we're doing is mildly moving into that stretch and then allowing the elbows to flex. Inhaling as you're dropping down. Exhale as you're pressing and extending the wrist or the elbows. With each one, see if you can squeeze a little bit more range of motion out of the elbows without pain. If you're able to get your elbows fully extended, then you can start to rock back hips to heels. Again, inhale forward, exhale as you sink back hips to heels. And after about 5 of those, we'll come up off the wrists, roll them out a little bit, and then we're going to get into the feet just a little bit. So tucking the toes, I want to turn the heels as far in as we can and specifically tuck the big toes underneath. And we're going to come right back into our crocodile breath. As we exhale, allow your hips to sink back and load into that big toe joint. I don't want it to be painful, but I want to feel some kind of like load at the joint or a little bit of stretch into the arch of the foot. Stay in a little bit of tension, and we're going to breathe from this space. Coming right back into that crocodile breath. Inhale, filling up that belly. Exhale, drawing navel into spine. Again, notice how your inhale draws that breath more forward. The pelvis tilts forward, and that lightly lifts you off the load of your foot. And then on the exhale, as you draw the navel into spine, your pelvis scoops and you sink into the foot a little bit more. So you get a little bit of unloaded nature on the inhale and loading back into it on the exhale. But I don't want that inhale to take you completely out of tension. I want to stay in tension just a little bit, but your exhale loads you a little deeper. And see if you can get a little squeeze into that range of motion a little bit more without going into pain. Can you feel that arch of the foot kind of melt and give you a little bit more range of motion into that big toe joint? And we're going to rock forward, and we're going to turn the heels all the way out and see if we can get the pinky toes tucked underneath, or at least as many of those toes as possible. And we're going to do the exact same thing, allowing our hips to sink back with our exhale. And then from here, we're filling up into that crocodile breath, filling into the abdominal space. On the exhale, navel comes to spine, and feel the weight of your hips scoop and load a little deeper into the heels. Inhale kind of lifts you lightly. Exhale allows you to sink a little deeper. How does this feel on the right side compared to the left side? Is one foot tighter, more restricted? Is it uncomfortable? And after a good 5 breaths, we're going to come out of it. We're going to come back up just to our regular spread hands and knees. I want the toes to be tucked so that you're feeling that big toe kind of loaded, lightly loaded again. And we're going to come right back into our breath, but now we're going to accentuate our pelvic tilts. So breathing in, filling up that abdominal space. Feel your belly really open up to the floor. We're getting a big sway in the back. On the exhale, as you draw that navel in, we're going to scoop the pelvis, but we're only allowing that movement to go up to the 12th rib. I don't want to get into a big cat. I'm not opening up to the upper back. I want to stay nice and fixed through the shoulders. Inhale, opening up that belly as much as you can towards the floor. I want to avoid any kind of pinch or pain in the low back. So if you got pinch, then I want you to only open up as much as you can without going into that pinch. On the exhale, we're scooping as we're drawing that navel up and in towards our spine and getting as much load and stretch into that low back as you can. With each one, see if you can squeeze a little bit more into that scoop. The more you're able to connect that breath, opening up into the anterior tilt, and exhale, really drawing that navel into the spine, full exhale. You're going to add a little bit more mobility into that pelvic movement. And now I want to start to let this move up the rest of the spine. So as we scoop, we're going to continue to scoop and feel that scoop. Draw in each vertebrae of the spine one at a time until it gets up to the shoulders, in which case we're going to press into the floor and spiral our elbow pits inward, doing our bowls of soup inward spiral as we press. Allow that movement to go over the top of the head, and we're trying to touch our tailbone to our forehead in this imaginary place in the middle, doing a nice big cat. And then we're going to move anteriorly through the pelvis as we inhale. But again, I want the spine to move one vertebrae at a time. The pelvis is moving the spine so that the spine moves as a wave. As that movement comes up to this your chest, reach your sternum to the floor as you spiral your elbow pits forward, just like we did in our wrist mobility. And then the head comes up last. Exhale, scoop, and feel that wave of the pelvis. Spiral the elbows inward as you
press into the floor. See if you can feel that nice big stretch between the shoulder blades and the lower back at the same time. Inhale into your anterior tilt. Let that wave move up the spine as it comes to the chest, spiraling the elbows out as your sternum reaches to the floor and the head comes up last. See how well you can connect your breath to this nice big wave that generates from the pelvis, moves up the spine and into the shoulders and out through the hands.
Good. Go ahead and take a little break on the wrist, and I'm going to go through what we're going to do next. We're going to come right back to those cat-cows, but we're going to turn them into circles. We're going to start with doing some rib glide. So imagine that my hands are on the floor. I want to move my ribs side to side from our quadruped position, but I want to do so in a way that's not moving from the shoulders or not moving from the hips. So we got to be able to find this glide through our ribs, which can be really challenging to do. And then we're going to slowly turn that more into a big circle. So coming back to our quadruped, spread hands, toes are tucked. I want to be a little active on that big toe in the back. And we're seeing if we can reach our ribs out to the side and then out to the other side. I want to try to keep the shoulders fixed over the hands. So I don't want my shoulders moving side to side where they're deviating from my hands. They're staying over the hands. Rib cage moves out as far as it will go. You'll feel a little stretch into that side body. Same thing to the other side. Want to make sure that we're not shifting the hips over the feet or the knees side to side. Again, they stay relatively fixed over. It's just the rib. This can be really challenging to figure out if you haven't done it before, because the neurology needs to be developed. So it might take a little while. Now, as you're feeling into that side, as you glide to one side, I want to bring in our breath, crocodile breath. Intentionally breathe into that side body of the side that is exposed. That rib is out. Can you breathe into that side? Nice inhale. On the exhale, we'll bring it back to center and move to the other side. Same thing. Can you bring a inhale into that space? Can you feel it stretch on the inhale? Exhale, bringing it back to center. Inhale as you move into the other side. Exhale as you bring it back to center. As you get that breath, if you're able to get that breath into that space, you should notice that it actually gives you a little bit more range of motion of the ribs. And now we're going to start to take this into our circles. So as you reach the ribs to one side, we're going to get our scoop through the pelvis as we press through the floor, lifting the spine up towards the ceiling. And then we're going to move it all the way across to the other side as we move our pelvis towards the floor. Head comes up, sternum reaches to the floor, and making a big circle with our rib cage. I like to think of this as we're playing with a jump rope, making a nice big spinning rope out of our spine. I want to see how big can I make that circle, all the way up, all the way out, and all the way down. And even though we're moving through this big space, we're still breathing into that abdominal space, filling up that crocodile breath. And once you do 5 circles in one direction, we're going to switch directions and go the other side.
The more you're able to maintain that tension throughout the circle with your breath, will elicit a nice, juicy movement. This should feel good and not painful. We'll come off the wrists a little bit, get a little flow back to them. Now we're going to bring arms forward. I want to continue to have that back toe tucked. Nice spread hands, elbows are active. I want to try to keep the hips as much over the knees or forward as possible. I want to avoid letting the hips drop back behind the knees. Unless you have some shoulder pain or shoulder instability, in which case you need to be a little bit more in your lower core. So if the shoulders feel sensitive, it's okay for the hips to drop back. But if the shoulders feel good, I want the hips forward. Spread hands, gecko-like hands. I don't want those hands sliding out. You got to be really solidly downward pressed, active elbows straight. Inhale as you exhale, drawing the navel in. We're reaching the sternum down, keeping those elbows active and straight. On the inhale, we're coming right back up. And with each one, as we exhale, we're seeing if we can drop a little deeper. Now I want to feel that pelvic movement of our inhale and exhale. So as you're coming up and you're inhaling, your pelvis is kind of tilting towards the floor as your belly opens up. But as you're reaching down through the sternum, we're exhaling, drawing that navel in, and we're scooping into it. Notice how that scoop actually adds a little bit more stretch to the shoulders, especially around the armpit area. What I'm trying to avoid is having the belly open up and the pelvis tilt forward so that the rib is flaring out. This is going to get a lot more movement in the lower back, and you're going to get less focus on the shoulders. And I want to focus primarily on the shoulders here. Notice the right shoulder compared to the left shoulder. Is one side tighter and more restricted? Do both of your hands feel equally grounded to the floor, or do you feel like you're pressing harder on one side? On the next one, as you go down, we're going to stay down. I want to get down at a point of light tension, not massive tension. From here, we got our sticky gecko hands. So if I push my hands, it's going to slide my hips backwards so that my shoulder blades come up to my ears. And if I pull from my hands, it's going to slide my head and spine forward, and my shoulder blades are going to slide down my rib cage. I want to make sure the elbows remain active and straight as we're moving back and forth. Press, exhale and press, inhale and pull. Try to make sure that the elbows are actively straight, especially as you're pulling. I want to feel as much of that slide of the shoulder blades sliding down the ribs as if you're trying to move them into your back pockets of your hips. On the inhale, as you press, you're drawing those shoulders all the way up to your ears as if you're going to wear them as earrings. But again, the elbows are actively straight and the hands are pressing actively into the floor. And then we'll come up and roll the shoulders out just a little bit. And we're going to get back into the shoulders just a little bit more. Coming back to our regular quadruped position. At this point, again, spread hands. We're lifting the knees, but I want to keep the knees slightly bent. And we're going to see how much can you press through the hands to drop the chest down. This does not need to be super deep. We're not doing a down dog. This is similar, but we don't need to be all the way in it. And then from here, we're going to actively straighten one knee as you actively reach that heel to the floor. And then let that knee soften as you actively straighten the other knee and reach the heel to the floor. The heel does not need to touch the floor, but we are reaching towards the floor actively. I want to feel that nice, slow, drawn out stretch through the back of the leg. Might feel it in the hamstring, you might feel it in the back of the knee or in the calf, or even down on the arch of the foot. We're continuing to breathe into our crocodile breath. As your knee bends, you're inhaling. As you extend and reach, you're exhaling. If you need to drop out of this and give your shoulders a rest, that's perfectly allowed. I'm going to add one more little component to this. As you bend one knee, go ahead and lift that foot off the floor. Spread your toes as wide as you can, the knuckles of your foot wide, and ground through that entire forefoot as you reach and extend. Doing the same thing on the other side. Lift that foot, spread the toes, spread the knuckles, ground from big toe to pinky toe as you reach to the floor. I want to try to spread out that forefoot as much as possible. And notice if that draws a little bit bigger stretch, especially up to the calves or into the back of the knee. And we'll drop down, come off the wrists, and we're going to come into our shin box. So with shin box, I want to go, we'll have two different transitions from one side of shin box to the other. I'm going to start with just doing our kind of floss through. So I'm on left side shin box. I went left hand just outside the hip, nice spread hand, grounded palm, spiral that elbow pit away, out and away, so that you feel your shoulder blade drop down and back as your chest spreads and opens up. And I want to maintain that position. We're going to play with our back hip to start with. Simply just lifting up and opening up that knee towards the ceiling, nice and slow. Inhale as you bring it down, exhale as you lift. And with each one, we are slowly squeezing into that end range, seeing how much can you open that hip. And it's nice to have a hand in the back as if you're trying to reach to that hand so that you can give yourself a little bit of an indication of how much range of motion do you have here so that we can compare it to the other side. After 5, we're going to transition across. And the way I want to transition is we're opening up that knee until we get to a point where there's tension. I want to imagine that there is a string attached from the inside of my right knee to the inside of my left knee. I get to a point where that tension is there, and then that knee is, my opposite hand comes down to the floor, and that string is going to lift the other knee up. I want to maintain the tension of the string. I don't want slack in it until my right knee comes to the floor, and then I can bring my left knee down, ground that opposite hand, spiral the elbow, pack the shoulder, and open and spread the chest. And we're going to do the same opener on the other side. Exhale as you lift, slow, we're not forcing it. Inhale as you bring it down. Each one, see if you can squeeze a little bit more out of it. And again, we'll bring that hand up so that you have a nice little, can you compare? I don't have as much range of motion on my left hip. This side is a little bit tighter and I can't quite go as high. So this is a nice thing to pay attention to notice if there's a difference. On the last one, the 5th one, we're going to come back to our string, kind of our nice little floss across, keeping that tension in the string as we move across to the other side. Ground that palm, spiral the elbow, open chest, and now we're getting into the front of our hip. I want to imagine that inside of the knee is a pivot point, and I want to push into that knee, allowing this hip to roll up and over the other hip. I'm off the floor, and I want to feel this nice stretch through the front of my hip.
Inhale, letting it soften. Exhale as you draw the navel in, extending that hip. We can add our hand onto this as well. It's like I'm trying to touch my hip bone to my hand. And I'm seeing how far can I go? How straight can I get my hip? Is there a little bend in it? Is there a little flex? Or can I get it to straighten up completely? On the fifth one, we're gonna do our floss. Opening up that knee, shifting across, keep the tension in the string as we come to the other side. Palm down, spiral elbow, open chest. Pivot point on the inside of the knee, lifting and rolling that hip over the top of the other hip to feel into that stretch of the front of the hip. Inhale as you soften, exhale as you reach. Again, using that hand to give you a little bit of an indication of how much range of motion. Does it look different on this side? I have a little bit less range. I am not quite getting full extension of this hip. Again, this side is tighter, largely related to my right knee. This is a fairly common pattern, but I want to get really comfortable and familiar with the common tension patterns in the body. Again, nice exhale as you squeeze, inhale as you soften, and then we're going to thread or floss across the other side, finding that tension in the string, opening across and bringing it back. Now, we've got a few more to do, but I want to give another option for our transition. So you can continue to do that thread or the floss through, or we can do a leg thread through. So the leg thread through is the leg that is in behind. We're going to lift that whole knee and ankle off the floor, spiral it around, thread underneath the other foot or other leg, and then lift that leg up, spiral it around till you put that knee behind your heel. Trying to do this as best we can without using our hands. If you need to use a little bit of hands to touch, that's fine. If you just can't do this because of balance or pain, then continue to work the other transition. So now we're coming right back into our pivot point through that knee, rolling the hip, finding that stretch, and now we're going to add to it. I want to imagine we got a piece of bread and we got a buddy over there and we want to share that bread. I'm sharing it with Skeletor off in the corner. On the inhale, let the hip soften, bringing it all the way back. Exhale, we're driving through that knee, extending the hip, feeling that stretch first, and then sharing our bread. I want to see if we can draw that stretch from that front of the hip up and across into our reach. I want to watch out for dropping the chest or the shoulders to the floor. I want to stay nice and long through our loaded shoulder, and we're simply rotating around that to see how far can we share, can we reach that hand. How long can you get from that knee to fingertips with that nice exhale? We're continuing to breathe into our crocodile breath. Exhale, drawing navel to spine as you reach and rotate, and then we'll transition across to the other side. This thread through transition is a really nice hip mobility drill that you can add in if you're able to do it. Nice grounded palm, spiraled elbow, open chest, pivot point through the knee, roll that hip over, and then add in your sharing of bread. Notice if one side is tighter than the other. My left hip has been tighter in 2 movements. It's tighter in this as well. I can't reach as far, and I feel it largely through that hip and a little bit into my low back. And it's actually a little tighter than usual. That's largely because my right knee has been bothering me a lot more, and so I'm my movement has been compromised because of it. And so I probably need a little bit more of this work throughout the day. With each one, we're trying to squeeze a little bit more range without forcing it. Continuing to use our crocodile breath, drawing that belly into spine as you extend the hip and as you reach and rotate. And then we're going to bring it back to the other side. And I'm not going to ground the palm this time. If you need to keep one hand down, that's fine. If you're able to be in this position without using that hand, we're going to try to be on that hand as little as possible. We're still going to start with rolling this back hip up and over to find that little bit of stretch. And now we're going to add some folds. Think of this as a modified pigeon. I'm simply reaching my sternum and my hands through my knee. As I exhale, I'm actively keeping that back hip opened up, reaching through that back knee or hip bone. Exhale as you reach. Inhale, we come all the way up and transition across. And we're going to do the same thing. Reaching that hip bone forward. Exhale as we reach through our knee. Inhale, bringing it across. And we're going to go back and forth on this a few times. We'll actually spend a decent amount of time here because I kind of want to add to our position. But the big thing here is continue to reach that back hip forward. Let that hip roll prior to your fold. I want to feel that tension in that back hip and see if we can also feel some stretch through the front hip as we go from side to side. Notice the difference of each side. We should probably already have some indications of that one hip, front of one hip being a little tighter, more restricted, being less mobile. I want to bring some awareness into the back of the front hip as well as our low back. Do you feel greater tension on one side? Are you able to reach as far? Or does one side go farther than the other? Notice if your thread through or your floss through are getting a little easier as well. Your transition, does your transition get smoother as you move side to side? And now I want to start to open up the hips a little bit more. So as you come into your shin box, we're going to spread the knees a little bit wider. You no longer have to just work through that knee. We can reach into a lot of different directions. You can reach behind your knee. You can reach through the knee. You can reach straight forward. You can even go against the grain towards that back side. Playing with this will allow you to feel different load patterns through the hips as well as the back. Main thing here is I want to make sure that we're not moving into pain. I'm going to say let's spend maybe 3 to 5 breaths on each side, exploring before you move to the other side. And then do the same thing on the other side. With exploration, I want to go in I don't necessarily know what these movements are going to feel like, so this is a chance to discover something new. As we get into our back, into our position, does it feel different on the right side with each of these positions? Is it easier? Do you feel like you have more access? Or does it feel tighter and more restricted? Or does it just feel challenging? Does it feel like your neurology has to work harder on one side compared to the other? As we're going back and forth, we're going to continue to open up that back leg more and more to where we get closer to
what we'd consider like a yoga class pigeon pose.
But we're still kind of keeping our exploration around. We can move in different positions. Give yourself, 2 or 3 breaths, well, maybe 2 to 5 breaths on each side for each change of position. If you're doing the leg thread through, you may get to where you can lift from further back, opening that hip up even more. And as you transition to the other side, instead of just coming into shin box, you can move as much into that full range as you possibly can. Again, working on opening up the hips, adding in some levels of mobility. This is also adding a little bit of core stability into our movement as well. We're going to come back into our starting point for our shin box. And this will be the last position we work on with the shin box, and it's getting into our side body reach. So I got my left knee is forward and bringing my left hand up and over. And I want to first come into our crocodile breath from this position. I want to breathe in to our 360 or balloon breath. But because I got my left arm up, that breath is going to naturally move more into the left side. And I want that. I want to feel that inhale, expanding out. Exhale, drawing navel into spine. With each one, see if you can expand out. Can you feel that stretch? And can you feel that stretch more directly into the side body or even a little bit towards the back? I don't want that breath to just go forward. Can you play with this and intend that breath to move a little bit directly laterally or posteriorly into the back? And let's go ahead and transition to the other side and do the same thing. Bringing that arm up and breathing specifically into that side body space. Notice if it feels different on this side. Is it expand more or does it expand less? Is it more difficult? Does it feel tight and restricted? This side for me feels tight and restricted, especially as I try to breathe more posteriorly into the low back. It's an area where I have more tension, and that's affecting my breathing, and it's also affecting my ability to stay stable over my knee. And it's largely a compensation for having an unstable knee. So I want to play with this, see if I can get it to work a little bit better because its normal function is not functioning. I want to get that function as much as I can through my movement practice because it's not going to happen in my gait based on having an unstable knee. So each one, we're really trying to breathe into those areas that feel a little tense and restricted without forcing it. And then exhale, drawing that navel into spine. After 5 or 6 breaths, we're going to transition back to the other side. And we're going to do the same thing, but now we're going to add some reach. So again, starting out, breathing into that side body space. But now on the exhale, you're going to reach down through the hip to ground into the floor as you lift that elbow up higher towards the ceiling. Feel the shoulder blade rise up on the shoulder blade, on the rib cage. On the exhale, on the inhale, you're letting it soften, letting the hip relax. Exhale, pressing into that hip as you lift up and rise through the elbow. See if you can reach a little taller on each one. And again, after 5 breaths, We're going to transition and do the same thing on the other side. Starting out by just bringing in that breath, nice inhale, and on the exhale, grounding down through the hip as you reach up through the elbow. Again, notice how is one side easier or more challenging to get that breath into, and do you feel a bigger stretch once you start to ground down and reach up through that elbow? After 5, we'll go ahead and relax. We're going to come all the way back down to our back on the floor. And we're going to coming back to our crocodile breath, making big C shapes with our hands, squeezing into that mid-core. We'll use this as a little bit of another assessment to see if the quality of that breath has changed. Do you feel like you can get a little bit more expansion of that inhale to the exhale? After 2 or 3 breaths, go ahead and let your hands drop down to the side, and we're going to let our legs go straight. In fact, we're going to bring our arms up into a nice Y position. I want to make sure that this is comfortable on the shoulders. Arms do not have to come straight overhead, more at this Y, or if we had our legs spread, we'd make an X. I want elbows to be softly on the ground. If you have trouble with that, the arms can come a little bit lower. I want to make sure that this is not painful. We're now going to get into our baby rolls. So taking a nice deep breath into our crocodile breath. On the exhale, we're going to press lightly through our left heel as we reach across the body slowly with our left hand. I want to make sure that we do not move into pain. So the first few reps are going to be short. We're not reaching long. As you exhale, drawing navel into spine. Inhale, you're coming back to center, filling up your crocodile breath. Exhale, reach through the right heel, reach across with the right hand. Again, keep the movement small to make sure it is not painful. And by small, I want to think, if I do not care how far you go, if all you're able to do is lightly lift the shoulder up and lift the head up, and this is as far as you can get without getting into pain in your back, then this is the end range of your range of motion. If you're able to go further without pain, then we slowly squeeze more range into it, but we're allowing our breath to guide us to make sure that we are not pushing too far. I'm continuing to push through that heel lightly as I reach a little further. If you are not experiencing pain, then as we go further, I want to start to, as I get into my end range, reaching and extending through my fingertips. As I get to that end range, I now want to bring in my crocodile breath from this position, breathing specifically into that side body, similar to what we just did in the shin box side body. That same area of the side of the low back that is exposed. Breathing into it and letting it expand. As you exhale, softly reach the fingertips and the toe tips away from each other. I'm on my left side, so it's left fingers and left toes getting long. And I'm seeing if I can draw that nice stretch out. Inhale, feel that expansion into the crocodile. Exhale, navel to spine as you reach and squeeze a little further. Then we'll bring it across to the other side and do the same thing. Nice reach, find your comfortable end range. Breathe into that side body, exhale, drawing navel in. Reach fingertips away from toe tips. This is a good, nice position to get 2 or 3 soft breaths. reaching a little further without forcing it. And then we're going to come back to center. And we're going to do the same thing with our legs. So lifting your leg up a little bit. I want to keep this foot elevated. I don't want to let it drop down towards the floor. So we're going to reach across, but we're reaching as if we're trying to touch something up on a table and not reach to something down on the floor. And we're reaching through the toes, imagining that those toes are trying to get long so that you feel that stretch all the way up into the hip. Again, I only want to go so far to start with. Inhale as you bring it back to center. Lift the other leg. Exhale, lightly reach across, making sure we are not moving into pain. With each one, see if you can squeeze a little bit more length out without it hurting. The shoulder blade is allowed to lift up off the floor. I want to see how far can I reach up to that shelf, maintaining at least a little bit of contact with the back of my hand. So shoulder is allowed to come up. Inhale at center, exhale as you reach. Notice if one side feels tighter and more restricted than the other side. After about 5 to 10 side to side, we're going to reach and we're going to hold light tension, and I want to bring that breath back into that side body breath. This one's going to be a little bit more to the anterior of the side, just simply because of our position, but we're breathing in on the exhale. We're getting long through the toe tips and reaching back through the fingertips. Get 2 or 3 nice subtle breaths, seeing if you can get a little longer on each one. And then same thing to the other side. Again, I want light tension, not massive tension. All these movements should feel juicy, not painful. If you are in a state of pain, then you are pushing too far. Feel that nice expansion into that side body on the inhale. Exhale. Feel that length through fingertips and toe tips. And then we're going to roll all the way onto our belly. Seeing if we can keep arms continuing to be overhead. And we're breathing into our crocodile breath from this position. Feeling that expansion through that balloon breath all the way through that core. Exhale, navel comes into spine. So in this position, if you have back pain or shoulder pain, I want you to be even more cautious than usual, because this can be a potentially painful range of motion. So go slow. I'm not worried about how far you go. I'm more concerned with it being not painful. I want to keep the elbows as tight to the ears as possible. I don't want the arms coming away from the body. I want that arm straight overhead, as if you're trying to keep your upper arm pinned to your ear. You're going to lift one elbow up towards the ceiling, and at the same time, you're going to lightly turn your head and look up towards the ceiling. And you're going to follow that gaze as it lifts your head and your shoulder up. And we're only rotating as far as you can go without pain or without your knee lifting up off the floor. Now, this back knee is allowed to slide up a little bit as you roll. This will give you a little bit more range of motion. As you inhale, we're coming back to center and doing the same thing through the other side. Keep the hands spread, keep the elbow or the arm tight to the ear, looking up over your shoulder. Eyes are looking up towards the ceiling. As it lifts you up,
only going as high as you can without your knee coming up off the floor. Inhale on the way down. Exhale as we come back up. We're still doing our crocodile breath. Draw that navel in as you reach and rotate. We're seeing how much can you rotate. Think of this like a baby, right? We're doing baby rolls. Babies roll from belly all the way to back. I'm seeing if I can develop a good transition from back to belly and belly to back. On the next one, as you reach and rotate, find a nice soft tension that you can maintain, and we're going to breathe into that side body space. Inhale, breathing intentionally. Exhale, drawing navel into spine as you lightly reach the shoulder blade back towards the floor. For 2 or 3 breaths, and then we'll move back to the other side and do the same thing. Keep that long arm close to the ear, tight to the ear. I don't want that arm pointing straight up to the ceiling. It's pulled in tight to the ear. Breathing into that side body space. Exhale. You're trying to reach your shoulder towards the floor. Inhale, letting it be soft. Exhale, squeezing into it just a little bit more. And we'll come back to center. And for the last movement, again, this one is going to be even more challenging. So if you have back pain, then this is probably one that you want to avoid for right now. Or at very least, go incredibly slow on. We're going to bring arms straight out to the side with the palms down. I'm bending one knee and I'm flexing my foot like I'm trying to pull the top of my foot down towards my shin. Crocodile breath in. On the exhale, we're simply lifting that heel like we're trying to touch the ceiling. Inhale, letting it back down. We're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. Pull that dorsum of the foot back towards the shin actively. Inhale into your crocodile breath. Exhale, press the heel up like you're trying to touch the heel to the ceiling. And then let that back down. We're seeing, can you get that lift? And is it painful? If you're able to lift your knee, keeping that heel active, we're going to come back to the other side, do the same thing. And this time, as you reach, we can allow that hip to roll as if you're trying to reach your heel across the body to place it on the floor. This is I call this a scorpion. Now I only want this rotation to go as far as I can go comfortably and non-painfully. Inhale into the crocodile breath. Exhale as you lift and rotate. If you're able to start getting some good rotation, then I want to check in with the front of my shoulders. As I lift my heel and reach that heel, I don't want my shoulder lifting up off the floor. I only want to go as far as I can go with that reach without my shoulder coming up. That'll get a nice little traction stretch on that exhale as we go side to side. Notice if one side feels tighter and more restricted. Is it harder to lift one leg up than the other leg? And then we're going to come all the way back onto our back again, and we're going to reassess our crocodile breath. So again, making our big C shapes out of our hands, pressing into that side body space, and breathing in, filling up and expanding into the hands. Index fingers, side palm,
and thumb. Front of the abdomen, side of the body, and low back, all expanding out like a balloon on the inhale. Exhale, navel draws into spine, and let your hands squeeze a little tighter so that you have good resistance to breathe into. With 5 or 6 nice full breaths in and out, notice how much better does that breath expand? Do you have more range? Is it more forceful on that inhale? Can you feel it really pushing out against the resistance of your hands? Do you feel like you have more range of motion of both inhale and exhale? And after 5 breaths, we'll let our arms come down to the side and relax, but continue to breathe into that crocodile breath. And we're going to also allow that breath to start to come up into the ribs, into the chest, up into the neck and shoulders. Continuing to exhale, navel to spine. And on the inhale, notice if there's any tension in the ribs or chest or shoulders or neck. And if there is, softly breathe into that tension. Feel it expand and stretch a little bit. And then on the exhale, let that tension go. Let it melt down to the floor. And with each inhale, breathe into that next layer of tension. You can feel it open up and stretch a little bit. And then on the exhale, allow it to melt. Like with each, you can imagine each breath as a waterfall, just rinsing that tension off the body and onto the floor. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes, and then very slowly, we'll sit back up.